Whoever saves one life saves the world entire. Schindler's List wasn't just a historical drama. It was a haunting act of cinematic witness. Behind the camera, chaos simmered. Actors broke down in tears. Steven Spielberg nearly quit, and the weight of Holocaust memory hung over every frame. What audiences didn't know was how grueling it was to make. Today we're revealing 12 weird facts about Schindler's List, from casting heartbreak to shocking production choices. And at the end, a bonus fact so haunting, it reshaped Spielberg's career. Stay with us, because this is the story you were never meant to forget. Spielberg almost refused to direct it. Schindler's List wasn't the blockbuster that Hollywood expected from Spielberg. It was the film he kept trying to avoid. For years, he doubted he had the maturity to handle the Holocaust on screen. He even offered it to Martin Scorsese, who was more interested in gritty realism at the time. Scorsese declined, telling Spielberg the story needed his sensitivity, not his own sharp-edged violence. Roman Polanski was also approached but turned it down, saying it was too personal. His mother died in Auschwitz, and he himself survived Krakow's ghetto as a child. Spielberg finally relented after realizing he couldn't keep running from it. He described the project as an obligation, not a choice. It wasn't about career prestige, it was about conscience. Spielberg even refused a salary, calling his earnings blood money. Not a hitmaker's move, but a moral stand. And when the cameras rolled in Poland, it became clear why he had been so reluctant. The film was going to wound everyone involved. The decision to film in black and white. Audiences often assumed the black and white aesthetic was a stylistic choice. In reality, it was born from Spielberg's determination to strip away Hollywood gloss. He didn't want movie beauty. He wanted something closer to wartime newsreels. Cinematographer Janusz Kaminski even studied old 1940s footage to mimic its rawness. But the choice wasn't just technical, it was emotional. Black and white drained the film of spectacle, leaving only stark human suffering. Spielberg compared it to removing the safety net of cinematic distance. Still, there was one shocking exception, the girl in the red coat. That single splash of color divided even his crew. Some thought it was manipulative, others genius. Spielberg said it was a metaphor for the world's selective vision. People saw the Holocaust unfolding, yet looked away until it was too late. The impact? Critics called it one of the boldest visual decisions in modern cinema. More importantly, Holocaust survivors later said it captured exactly what memory feels like: shadows, fragments, and one unforgettable image burned in red. Ralph Fiennes terrified his co-stars. Ralph Fiennes wasn't yet a star when he took on the role of Amon Goeth, the sadistic Nazi commandant, but his transformation was so convincing that even cast members felt uneasy around him. Dressed in Goeth's uniform, with his chilling calmness, Fiennes gave off an aura that blurred fiction and reality. There are chilling stories from the set. One crew member recalled that extras playing Jewish prisoners physically flinched whenever Fiennes walked by. Ben Kingsley, who played Itzhak Stern, admitted he had trouble separating the actor from the monster he portrayed. Spielberg later said, "Ralph made me uncomfortable. He made me sick," which is exactly what the role demanded. What audiences didn't know was that Fiennes avoided cartoonish villainy. He tried to understand Goeth's psychology, which made him more frightening. He loved women, good wine, his dog. But he killed without remorse, Fiennes explained. That banality of evil was the point. He was not a demon from another world. He was disturbingly human. Spielberg struggled with depression during filming. Filming Schindler's List wasn't just exhausting, it was soul-crushing. Spielberg lived in Krakow for months, often shooting in places mere miles from where atrocities had occurred. Survivors visited the set, reliving traumas as extras. The air itself carried memory, the director admitted. He sank into depression. Every night, he would call his friend Robin Williams, who told him jokes to pull him back from despair. Spielberg later said those phone calls saved him from breaking. He also spent hours watching episodes of Seinfeld, trying to find balance after staging mass executions by day. This wasn't normal filmmaking. It was a kind of emotional excavation, where every call sheet meant confronting the darkest parts of humanity. Spielberg even admitted he considered walking away. But the responsibility to survivors kept him going. He said, "I didn't feel like a director. I felt like a conduit for their voices." That weight of responsibility changed Spielberg forever. After Schindler's List, he never made another movie in the same way again. Liam Neeson almost lost the role. Today, it's hard to imagine anyone but Liam Neeson as Oskar Schindler. But when casting began, he was far from the obvious choice. Spielberg first considered stars like Harrison Ford and Kevin Costner, both of whom brought box office weight. But Ford turned it down, believing his celebrity would distract audiences. Neeson, then a respected stage actor but hardly a household name, came to Spielberg's attention after his performance in Anna Christie on Broadway. Neeson's audition wasn't flashy. He simply embodied Schindler's charm and quiet authority. Spielberg later said, "He had this mixture of arrogance and empathy. That's what the role demanded." But even after winning the part, Neeson nearly lost it. MCA Universal executives doubted his drawing power, pressuring Spielberg to replace him with a bigger star. Spielberg refused, insisting Schindler needed to feel like a man audiences could both admire and question, not a Hollywood icon. That gamble paid off. Neeson's nuanced portrayal earned him an Oscar nomination and transformed his career. Before Schindler's List, he was known for supporting roles. Afterward, he became a leading man, eventually reinventing himself decades later as an action star. The irony? His defining role wasn't about heroics with fists or guns, but about moral courage and the complicated humanity of a flawed man who chose to do good. Survivors recreated their trauma on screen. What audiences didn't realize is that many extras weren't professional actors. They were Holocaust survivors or children of survivors who relived history in front of the camera. Spielberg deliberately cast locals in Krakow, many of whom carried personal or family memories of Nazi brutality. For them, filming wasn't performance, it was resurrection. Some wore replica Star of David armbands identical to those their parents once wore. Others stood in freezing conditions during the liquidation scenes, knowing that decades earlier, family members had endured the same horrors in real life. Crew members recalled moments when extras broke down crying, unable to continue. In one instance, a woman collapsed when she saw actors dressed as Nazi soldiers marching her toward deportation. Spielberg encouraged space for grief. Shooting often paused while survivors shared stories. These moments gave the production a chilling authenticity, as if the ghosts of the past were watching. Ben Kingsley said, "You didn't have to act. The environment acted on you." Not every crew member could withstand it. Some later admitted the emotional strain haunted them for years, yet this painful authenticity gave Schindler's List a power no Hollywood polish could fake. It wasn't performance, it was memory made visible. The crew faced moral dilemmas, filming Auschwitz. One of the most controversial decisions was Spielberg's choice to film near Auschwitz. Out of respect, the crew didn't shoot inside the camp itself, but recreated it painstakingly in a replica built outside the original site. Still, the proximity stirred fierce debate. Survivors questioned whether cinema should dare to reconstruct such horror at all. The moral weight extended to the cast. Actor Embeth Davidtz, who played Helen Hirsch, said filming her scenes of abuse left her feeling violated, even though it was staged. For crew members, it was common to go home shaken, unable to sleep. Spielberg later admitted he never stopped questioning whether it was right to dramatize such suffering. Yet, he argued, cinema was a tool for remembrance. By recreating Auschwitz, he forced global audiences to look directly at what many had tried to sanitize or forget. The meticulous set design was so accurate that survivors who visited were stunned, saying it was like walking into their memories. This blurred line between representation and reality raised questions. Was the film preserving memory or exploiting trauma? For Spielberg, the answer lay in intent. His mission wasn't spectacle, it was testimony. He later said, "I wanted the film to be a survivor itself." The cast bonded in unlikely ways. Despite the darkness, moments of humanity broke through. The cast and crew developed rituals to cope with the emotional toll. They gathered for Shabbat dinners on Fridays, creating a sense of community in the middle of despair. Spielberg himself often attended, saying it was the only time he felt light during the shoot. Ben Kingsley became something of a spiritual anchor, supporting younger actors through breakdowns. Liam Neeson admitted he struggled with guilt, portraying a flawed hero while surrounded by people reliving ancestral trauma. Yet those Shabbat meals reminded everyone of resilience, that joy could exist even in darkness. Ironically, it was comedy that often kept people sane. Robin Williams's nightly phone calls to Spielberg were part of that coping, but on set, actors also tried to break tension. There are stories of extras dancing between takes, or crew members cracking nervous jokes in hushed tones. The mix of sorrow and laughter created a fragile balance. Spielberg later said that without those human moments, the film might have collapsed under its own weight. The cast wasn't just reenacting history, they were living inside a space where grief and resilience had to coexist. That raw humanity translated directly into their performances, giving the film its uncanny emotional depth. Spielberg kept his distance from actors. Unlike many of his previous films, Spielberg took an unusually hands-off approach during Schindler's List. He deliberately avoided rehearsals and minimized explanations, wanting performances to feel raw rather than polished. Liam Neeson recalled that Spielberg rarely gave him direct instructions, just subtle nudges that pushed him to trust his instincts. This style was especially tough on Ben Kingsley, who thrived on precision, but Spielberg believed over-direction would sanitize the pain. "If it feels messy, it should feel messy," he told the crew. The chaos mirrored real life, not Hollywood staging. The method worked, though at a cost. Actors often left scenes emotionally shattered, unsure if they had done enough. But when they watched the dailies, they saw performances vibrating with authenticity. Spielberg even instructed the cinematographer to shoot with handheld cameras in chaotic moments, adding to the unpredictability. It wasn't standard Spielberg perfectionism. It was a deliberate embrace of imperfection. In one scene where Jews scramble onto trains, extras stumbled, missed marks, and collided. Spielberg kept it all, saying the disarray was truer than any choreography. The result was a film that felt less directed and more witnessed. By stepping back, Spielberg gave his cast the freedom to break down, stumble, and reveal the humanity beneath the script. That choice elevated Schindler's List from historical drama to something closer to lived memory. The Red Coat Girl was based on reality. The most haunting image in the film is the little girl in the red coat, wandering through chaos as Krakow's ghetto is liquidated. Many assume she was a symbolic invention, but Spielberg based her on a true account from survivor Roma Ligocka, who really wore a bright red coat as a child during Nazi occupation. The image burned into Spielberg's imagination after reading Thomas Keneally's novel. He saw it as a metaphor for visibility and denial. The world saw the Holocaust, but did nothing. When the film premiered, audiences were stunned by the emotional punch of that single splash of color against black and white. But it wasn't just cinematic flourish. Years later, Ligocka revealed her story in her memoir, The Girl in the Red Coat, connecting her survival directly to that symbolic figure. She admitted she wept when she saw the film, recognizing herself in the haunting imagery. That moment, only a few seconds long, became the film's defining visual. It wasn't spectacle, it was accusation. By highlighting one child among thousands, Spielberg forced audiences to confront individual loss, not statistics. It was the power of cinema boiled down to one unforgettable stroke of color. And here's our engagement moment. If you're still with us, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the next facts reveal just how far Spielberg went to carry this emotional weight and how it nearly broke him. Filming forced Spielberg to seek spiritual guidance. The emotional toll of Schindler's List pushed Spielberg into unfamiliar territory. Though raised Jewish, he had long felt distant from his faith. But while shooting scenes of mass executions and deportations, he began questioning not just art, but existence. Survivors on set invited him to synagogue, and for the first time in decades, Spielberg reconnected with prayer. He later admitted he felt like a vessel rather than a director, channeling stories bigger than himself. The cast noticed the shift. Ben Kingsley said Spielberg carried an invisible burden, moving silently between takes with tears in his eyes. Crew members recalled moments where he physically couldn't call cut, frozen by the weight of what he was recreating. His spiritual reconnection bled into his filmmaking. Spielberg refused to glamorize Schindler as a savior. Instead, he emphasized the Jewish character's resilience, grounding the narrative in community survival, not a single man's heroics. By the end, Spielberg described himself as changed forever. He created the Shoah Foundation shortly after, dedicating his career not just to entertainment, but to memory and testimony. What began as a film project became a personal transformation, a reconnection with identity through unbearable darkness. The final scene wasn't in the script. One of the most powerful moments in Schindler's List comes after the story ends. Survivors and their descendants place stones on Oskar Schindler's grave in Jerusalem, paying tribute to the man who saved them. What most viewers don't know is that this scene wasn't originally in the screenplay. Spielberg conceived it late in production, realizing he needed to connect history to the present. Without it, the story risked being locked in the past, a finished tragedy. By including real survivors, Spielberg blurred the line between film and reality, reminding audiences that the Holocaust wasn't ancient, it was living memory. The decision was logistically difficult. Survivors traveled from across the globe to participate, many meeting each other for the first time. On set, the atmosphere was reverent, almost ritualistic. Spielberg filmed quietly with minimal crew, treating it less like cinema and more like ceremony. Critics hailed the scene as the film's emotional crescendo. Survivors called it an act of truth, one that lifted the film beyond dramatization. By ending with real faces instead of actors, Spielberg anchored the story in testimony. It wasn't just a movie anymore, it was history, breathing and unforgotten. Bonus fact: Spielberg directed Jurassic Park by day, Schindler's List by night. Here's the twist that still stuns Hollywood insiders. At the very same time Spielberg was filming Schindler's List in Poland, he was also overseeing the post-production of Jurassic Park, his glossy, effects-driven dinosaur spectacle. By day, he filmed harrowing scenes of death camps. By night, he faxed notes to ILM about CGI raptors and T-Rex roars. The contrast nearly broke him. He later admitted that the emotional whiplash was brutal. I was living in two different worlds. I would cry all day and then talk about dinosaurs at night. Robin Williams's nightly phone calls helped, but even Spielberg said no other period in his life was so fractured. Ironically, the pairing of those two films defined his legacy. Jurassic Park became a global box office phenomenon, while Schindler's List secured his reputation as a serious filmmaker. The same year, Spielberg proved he could deliver the highest-grossing blockbuster and the most devastating historical drama of the era. Few directors in history have ever spanned such extremes. What audiences didn't know was how much pain lay beneath that achievement. Spielberg called Schindler's List the toughest experience of my life. Yet without it, he said, his career would have felt incomplete. The bonus fact, then, is this: the man who gave the world thrilling dinosaurs also gave it a cinematic act of remembrance, created under impossible dual pressures. Not spectacle, but survival, both artistic and emotional. Schindler's List wasn't just a movie, it was testimony etched in celluloid. Behind its stark black and white frames lay casting battles, emotional breakdowns, moral dilemmas, and a director wrestling with his own identity. The chaos behind the camera matched the gravity on screen, and the result was a film that forever changed how cinema remembers history. So if this journey through the shadows of filmmaking moved you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Because, as the film reminds us, whoever saves one life saves the world entire.